Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's training. We wanted to go over a little bit about what we call active supervision when it comes to being in daycares this week. So we'll discuss active supervision, what that looks like, why it's best for our kids that we work with. And then if we have questions, we will be more than willing to get into those as well. So active supervision, the provider shall ensure that caregivers provide and maintain active supervision of each child. So this is every kid in every classroom, in every daycare that we attend. So what do you guys think active supervision means, and what does that look like?
I guess making sure that there's a teacher in every area, that there's children.
Yeah. Yep, making sure that there's teachers that are aware of all the kids, wherever the kids are in all the classrooms. That's a big one. Other thoughts or ideas? Okay. So what it looked like, caregivers' attention is focused on the children and not on caregivers' personal interest. Yeah, so Jada said actually watching them without distractions. Yep, that is exactly what this means. So personal interests include things like visiting with the other adult in the room, talking on a cell phone, text messaging, reading, lesson planning, napping, even if the children are napping, or performing tasks unrelated to childcare. So some of these things, like obviously if the kids are awake and you're napping, that's a big problem because you're not there focusing on what they're doing. So it's as if you weren't actually in the room. But even when the kids are napping, some people think that it's okay to take a nap at that point. And if one of your kids was to wake up though, and they didn't cry or really try to wake you up, they could easily leave the classroom just as if you were napping while the kids were awake. So making sure that we're awake at all times when we're in these daycares. Visiting with another adult. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't talk to the other teacher in the classroom, but when you are visiting with them, more so than you're paying attention to the kids, that can lead to accidents, harm, different things. Again, the kids could leave the classroom without you being aware. So making sure that the majority of our focus is on these kids. That really is what this active supervision looks like. They also classify active supervision as caregivers being aware of the entire group of children, even when interacting with a smaller group or an individual child. This is best done as caregivers position themselves so each child in their assigned group is actively supervised. So here you can see that she's engaged with this full group, but she's placed herself in the corner where she can see all of the other kids. She's also placed herself in a really good position if one of these kids decided they wanted to go and play somewhere else in the classroom, she can still see the other parts of the classroom as well. The only thing that she could do, again, because she has the whole group, this is perfect. The only thing that she could do to better her position in this, if there were other kids in the other areas, is putting herself in a higher level. So sitting on a chair or something so that she could see over these cabinets into the other areas to make sure that those kids were okay as well. But this is really great positioning for the fact that she's got the whole group engaged with her playing this game. So taking a closer look at what active supervision means and some of the do's and don'ts. Supervision means having awareness of and responsibility for each child and being near enough to intervene as needed. Why do you think it would be important to be aware and near enough to intervene with these kids?
Accidents happen so fast, so if you're not close and paying attention, you can't be there to respond immediately. That might cause the problem to escalate.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why. Accidents happen if a child decides that they want to hit another kid, but you're not paying attention or you're too far away. It could lead to serious injury for the one child that's being hit, or they could get into a hitting match. Just a lot of different things could happen. If a child decides to stand on a table and they're too young to actually understand what it means if they get too close to the edge of that table, if you're too far away and can't easily access them to put them back on the floor, they could fall off, and again, that serious injury, accident, and harm. Other ideas or thoughts as to why we would want to be aware and near all of these kids? Stacy, yeah, she said falling. Again, that really big one. They will get into trouble so easily and so quickly. So we're wanting to make sure that we're there to prevent anything that we really can. So when it comes to active supervision, any individual who counts in the caregiver to child ratio is responsible for the supervision and security of the children. So this means that in an infant classroom, you are able to have 4 infants per 1 teacher. If another teacher was to walk in and was just talking to you, but they didn't necessarily have to count in that ratio, they don't have to be actively supervising them, which means that they could be doing things like cleaning or putting the food together. They could be lesson planning, different things like that. But as long as one of you is aware of all the kids, again, in this child to teacher ratio, then you are covered, you're great. If there was a need for 2 teachers to be in there, say that you had 10 2-year-olds, the ratio in 2-year-old classroom is 7 2-year-olds to 1 teacher. So if you had 10 2-year-olds, you would need 2 teachers in there. Both of you would need to be actively supervising the whole group at all times. You wouldn't be allowed to have one of you leaving the classroom or one of you lesson planning. Like, you both need to be aware, because it is deemed at that point that there are too many kids for one teacher to only be actively supervising them. So lack of supervision, basically this one is meaning we are not allowed as providers or daycare directors to leave any child in the care of a person that is younger than the age of 16, even if there is an older adult in the classroom. So if you have a 16-year-old in a classroom, that's fine. But they cannot count in that caregiver to child ratio at all. They can't count as another adult. They can't count as being actively supervising these kids. Under 16, people under the age of 16 do not count at all when it comes to caring for children. Individuals who are 16 or older, so they're 16 or 17, they're able to be caregivers, so they can count in that child to caregiver ratio, but they can't be left alone in a classroom. You have to have an 18-year-old or older in these classrooms at all time for it to be counting as full child supervision. This includes when you are transporting kids, or if you're doing offsite activities, such as if you were to have a water day and you went to the park, 16 and 17-year-olds are not allowed to be left alone with those kids. And then all supervision rules apply to the provider and caregivers qualifying children while in care at the facility, during transportation, and during offsite activities. Basically what that means is if you as a caregiver brought your child to the daycare, they still count in that child to caregiver ratio, so they are still needing to be actively watched. You can't have your child just wandering around, roaming the halls. They still need to be actively supervised while they are in these daycares as well. Before we come into this, are there any questions so far? Awesome. So for your different age groups, your active supervision can look a little bit different. For your younger than 5 years of age, a caregiver physically is present in the room or the area with children. That means that you are sitting on the floor with those kids, you're sitting at the table where the kids are, you are physically present in a very close vicinity to where these kids are. If they're school aged or older, a caregiver can hear the children and is close enough to intervene. So again, if you are in one part of the classroom, your older kids are typically allowed to have more kids per one teacher. So if you're coloring with one group of children, but you can at least see all of the other kids and can hear what's going on, that is still counting as active supervision, because these kids typically don't get in as much trouble, but they're also more aware of their surroundings, they're more aware of their body, how it works. So the intervening in these situations are a lot more in the, they're in an argument with another child. So as long as you can hear them and you're close enough to intervene, you are still counting as active supervision, even if you're not in arm's length of all of these school-aged kids. And then, yeah, so supervision is basic to safety and the prevention of injury and maintaining quality childcare. So we've had a lot of complaints about subs being on their phones. And that biggest reason is because the safety of these kids means that you have to be actively watching them and looking out for them. But it also goes towards that quality childcare. You know, we are here to make sure that these kids are not only safe, but they're entertained and they're learning and they're growing. And that requires your personal connection with these kids. Are there any questions about anything that we went over in this training? Anything I didn't cover? Anything that way?